Hello, I'm Larry Lee with Brownfield Ag News. Tamas Houlihan joins us from the Wisconsin Potato and Vegetable Growers Association. A couple of topics we'll cover today. The first one, you have the well depth data collection. A lot of people don't know what's happening here, but your group of farmers is very active in monitoring water levels, water quality. Let's tell people that might not be farmers what exactly is happening here.
Yes, so our farms use high capacity wells, as many folks know, and a lot of them were drilled back in the 1960s or 70s. And so we have the data regarding how far down to the water table these wells were drilled. And so in the recent years, I would say beginning around 2012, 2013, we started asking our growers to check the depth to the groundwater table. And we have about 50 to 60 wells being documented in central Wisconsin. They're all in the central sands. And the farmers are using tools that the association paid for and provided to measure the depth to groundwater. And so about twice a year, in the spring and in the fall, we'll measure the depth to groundwater. And we've got a consulting firm called GZA, Geoenvironmental, who tracks all the data, records it, and then puts it together for us in spreadsheets and in charts, and basically shows us what's going on with the water table in central Wisconsin.
Now, from what I understand, all of this data that you and GZA are collecting and compiling is much more in depth than what the state of Wisconsin can do through DNR. Is that right?
Well, it's a very large network of wells. I don't want to say we're doing more than what the DNR is doing, but we are looking at a big list of wells and we are measuring the depth and we're tracking it over time. And what's been really interesting is to see that, some of these wells were dug in, 1964, for example, and we know that it was maybe 80 feet to groundwater. Well, we're tracking it, and there were times around 2012 and 2013 when it dipped even below that, where it was now down to maybe 83 or 84 or whatever. But now we're seeing it's a lot less. It's only 70 feet to the groundwater table. And in a lot of cases in central Wisconsin, the water table has risen between 4 and 14 feet between 2013 and 2020. So it's just been an amazing amount of water that our area has received, in the last 7 or 8 years. And it's just important to track it because there will be times of drought when it may drop down again. But we just want to make sure we're keeping track of how the water levels are being managed in central Wisconsin.
So once you have all this data, what do you do with it?
Well, we look at it periodically as the Water Task Force. That's another committee of the WPVGA that was formed a little over 10 years ago. And we try to be good stewards of the land and manage our resources such that we have enough water. And so we review the data and we talk about methods of conservation. You may have heard that we have a producer-led watershed protection grant approved for the Little Crover region, and it goes all the way over to the Wisconsin River. We have 6 farms participating in that. And so we're looking at management practices that can conserve water. And we've been doing it for years, but now we have a grant to do some even more extensive practices.
Now, what a lot of people may not realize is that, years ago, high capacity wells started back in late 50s, early 60s, but the technology has changed to where you can now apply that irrigation water very precisely and only in the amounts you need.
Absolutely. The technology has changed tremendously. And with variable rate irrigation, we can do exactly what you just said. There are even nozzles that can change the amount of water that comes out. We have fields that have been grid mapped. And so as the irrigation system moves across the field, it can apply more or less water depending on what's needed. And we've also gotten a lot better at targeting the timing of applications, such that water is applied specifically when the crop is bulking or when it really needs it, as opposed to just doing it on a calendar basis. And so the technology has really improved water conservation.
You have any idea how many farms are participating in the data collection?
There are about a dozen farms, and some of them have multiple wells. Like I'm thinking of, say, Oak Ray Farms, for example. They might have 20 wells that are part of the program. So it's not a large number. I mean, there are really only a little over 100 potato and vegetable farms in our entire state. And so we have over 10% of them participating. And again, this data collection is very specific to the Central Sands region, where water levels and fluctuating lake levels have been a big issue for years.
The important thing that I noticed in your program is that the association, like any farm data, you keep it private.
Well, yes and no. I mean, we do post some of the findings on our website. Again, when GZA comes out with the data reports, they'll put together a slideshow for a meeting, and we'll go ahead and post that on our website. I mean, we do want to be transparent with it, but yes, our growers are pretty particular about what data they will and won't share. And so for the most part, it's private data.
Have you had outside organizations come to the organization and say, how can we do this in our area? It's working well for you. What can we do?
Well, certainly with the producer-led watershed protection grant, we did have a couple of other watersheds approach us and say, hey, do you have some farmers in our area that would be interested in working on these issues? And the answer is yes. The 14 Mile Creek watershed has a very active, they're called the 14 Mile Watershed Alliance now. And so they have started to have conversations with the cranberry growers and potato growers in that watershed. And we are considering applying for a watershed protection grant next year. Same with Big Rocha Cree. We have potato growers in that region that are also in talks on forming a watershed protection grant group. And so, yes, it is something that we want to see spread out. We like farmer-led regional management of water.
The farmer-led groups have been very popular the last few years, and even have the attention of the governor with some more funding in his budget proposal. I'm sure you support that.
We do. We do. And, you know, these grants are not a huge amount of money. And the farmers in the Little Plover who agreed to pursue this, you know, the money is really not the driving force. Sure, it helps. You know, I think we got like $20,000 from the Department of Ag for the grant, but they know it's the right thing to do. They want to conserve water. They know water is their most precious resource, and they want to do everything they can to conserve it and protect it.
Anything else we should add on the water topic?
I don't think so. I think you really hit on it with the technology. Growers are getting a lot better at precision applications, and the timings and the amounts are very specific to each crop. I mean, we've figured out that potatoes, for example, need about 22 inches of water over the course of a growing season, whereas peas and beans require quite a bit less. And so the growers are learning how to manage that. Now, Mother Nature controls everything. And when you get a big downpour of rain, you can't do anything about it. However, you can then calculate that into your irrigation schedule and again, apply the appropriate amount based on soil moisture and things like that. So the technology has really improved, and it will continue to get better.
Speaking of that technology, I did speak with someone over the winter who's talking about using the center pivot irrigation systems with cameras mounted on them to identify weeds and pests and other plant issues. You know of anybody in the organization that might be experimenting with that too?
Not specifically that, but we do have some growers who are very into the latest high tech in terms of irrigation technology. And so I wouldn't be surprised if some of our larger farms are doing that. And we're certainly looking into hyperspectral imaging and infrared imaging. We hope someday to have the technology to fly a drone over a field and be able to spot, say, a late blight lesion in a field before it's starting to spread. And that could allow for a spot treatment with a chemical for one specific area rather than having to spread a pesticide over an entire field. And so that kind of imaging, remote sensing technology is something we have invested in heavily through our research program, and we'll continue to develop that technology.
That could be a game changer down the road, couldn't it?
Absolutely. And we have some great scientists at the University of Wisconsin who are really specializing in that area. And so we continue to fund those projects. I mean, it used to be flying an airplane over a field with cameras, and now it's getting to where you can just do a small drone and it'll go back and forth. And what we really need to do is be able to crunch that data in a timely manner. I think we have the technology to collect the data. Now we have to process it and use it quickly so it benefits the farmer.
Let's talk about planting. Both of us live in Wisconsin Central Sands region, and I've been seeing a lot of potato planters the last 2 weeks.
Yes, we've had an early start to the season. Typically April 10th, maybe April 15th is when a lot of the Central Sands farmers begin planting potatoes. This year they were able to go right around the 1st of April. And it was a cold month, a little bit colder than usual, I would say. But that's okay because the potato is a pretty hardy tuber and it's doing fine under the ground. And so for the most part, we're about 2/3 of the way done in central Wisconsin. I would say maybe even pushing 3/4 of the way done. From, I would say from about Coloma south all the way up to the Stevens Point area and as far west as the Wisconsin Rapids, Nakusa area, and then over to the Plainfield area to the east. And so this big Central Sands region is really moving along with potato planting. Guys will probably be wrapping up by the first week of May.
As far as the northern regions up by Antigo, a little later, eh?
Yes, they typically won't begin planting until the month of May. And so most of those guys are just in the preparatory stages. They're getting their seed ready. And it is our seed production region. And it's a little bit colder climate. And so they'll be planting probably from about May 10th until about May 30th. That would be their typical time frame.
I would imagine since the conditions have been so good, the farmers just saying, hey, let's just get this done.
Absolutely. I mean, they do want to plant when the temperature's right and the moisture's right, but that's a pretty big window. And as long as it's not, pouring rain, and as long as it's not 75 degrees or so, the real problem you get is when it's too warm. You don't want to plant the seed in really warm soil. Likewise, you don't want to plant it when it's in the 30s. But, anywhere from 40, 45 degrees all the way up to 60, 65 degrees is ideal for potato planting. And, a little bit of soil moisture is not bad. Some years when it's very dry, the growers can run their irrigation pivot across the field prior to planting, just to have a little bit of moisture there when you plant the spuds. So, yeah, but this year has been very cooperative. We've had a really good planting season thus far.
Anything you'd like to add today?
No, I think we covered it, Larry. Feel free to check back with me as the season progresses through May.
Sounds good. Tamas Houlihan with the Wisconsin Potato and Vegetable Growers Association. Thanks for joining us on Brownfield today.
Thanks, Larry.